that will always be ageless. I'm the type of dude that will always feel shameless. I'm the type of dude that they say is fucking heinous, cause I'm the type of dude that you know is fucking dangerous.
Hello everyone and welcome to Nerd Talk, where we find out what makes you nerdy, and today I have Angel Rivera with me today.
Hey, how's it going? And you pronounced it wrong again, it's just Rivera.
I'm sorry.
It's fine, no problem.
And he's a graphic designer, and he's worked for a couple of people around here in the Nashville area and some out-of-town stuff I've heard as well, is that correct?
Yes, I have. I've lived in Nashville for, I want to say, almost 5 years, but I've been a graphic designer for a lot longer than that, so I've kind of worked around.
That's cool. And I found out we went to the same school. Did we graduate around the same time? Because I think
I don't think so. I graduated almost 2 years ago. Do you know that we did go to the same school? That's where I remember you from.
Yeah, because I just saw your name and I was like, oh, hey, him.
Yeah.
And I thought that was...
I know when I saw your post in the Natural Creative group that that's kind of where we came in contact based off of this. I've been active in that group for a while, and yeah, I know a lot of C graduates that have been in that group for a while now.
I've been trying to get myself more connected and everything. That's why I've been trying to get on the Facebook groups and everything, because everything going on with 2020, it's been hard. So I've been trying more actively to get out there.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot more social media through other platforms instead of Facebook, just because, don't get me wrong, Facebook groups are great to network in, but you can always find, for example, I'm beginning to follow more artists through Twitter, just because it's a lot more focused on the art aspect, and a lot more pages through Instagram, just because it makes it quicker to be able to read and go. And the Facebook groups I generally am in are the technical groups, where it's someone can post a question. Another good one is two good platforms I've really got connected into has been Discord and Slack. Slack is kind of almost like the more professional version of Discord. And Discord, because it's a little bit more set up, a lot more little functions in it, you're more likely to find a lot of communities through it. But yeah, I'm really getting to grow and like the two of them.
It might sound weird coming from someone my age, but social media is one of those avenues that I'm not familiar with. I didn't get a computer until I was 15. It's really hard for me to be oh, social media, let me go here and find people. That's always neat to know, and thank you for sharing that and everything. But before we go any further, I also noticed that you were a former Army person, is that correct?
Yeah, I used to be in the Army. I did 6 years active duty. It was cool. I ended up kind of going around different parts of the world, pretty much doing whatever they told me to do. And I got to see different countries, got to see different states, because I'm originally from New York, and then got to move around because of it. And then, I learned a lot of stuff, met a lot of really interesting people, had a great time. Actually, the work wasn't the best, but the cool thing is when I got out, had GI Bill and everything, so college was good. Yeah, definitely a big part of my life at one point.
Was there anything that you took away from that experience of your life that you will always carry with you, I guess you can say, is your main part of you now?
Korean winters are really cold.
Okay.
Just a little heads up, if you're ever in Korea and it's winter time, it is really cold. I grew up in New York, and somehow Korean winters still top that.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind if I ever head to Korea anytime soon in the future.
Yeah, it's a beautiful country. It's so much stuff to do. I lived there for 2 years in total. Loved it. Every time I talk about it, it's all great things.
That's good. Now, I was talking about this because this is where we met originally, was in college and everything. You were working on the graphic design degree and everything. Was there what led you to that career path? Because I always feel like there's something about art in particular that draws us to it. Was there anything in particular that drove you to that field?
So, when I was a kid, I was always kind of an artsy person. I was actually a big video game head, and I wanted to get into game design. But I didn't really understand 3D at first. And my first thing I tried to learn was Photoshop. And especially because even though I did draw a lot back then, I wasn't really the best hand drawing. So I ended up getting into kind of just messing around Photoshop. Got really into it as a teenager, and one of my first jobs was at a print company. Once I got into the print industry and actually understanding how to make flyers, t-shirts, things like that, it kind of just grew with me. And it was crazy because even when I wasn't at work, when I would get home, I would still have Photoshop open, just doing different things, learning photo editing, learning learning like photo manipulation and different effects and cool stuff. And it was one of those things that always stuck with me. And then I got into 3D, got into like motion design, and still one of those things, it's still kind of the same love where I'm quoted saying a lot where I just want to make cool stuff, you know? And so it's one of the fields where get to make cool stuff. I enjoy sharing like these ideas and concepts. And one of the more recent kind of endeavors I've been in is been I don't want to say endeavor, but like kind of field is I do stage production for like on video walls or what's called DJ to music, and I do it for a lot of electronic music. And it's really cool because I get to think of like these animations, create them, and I get to see it played live with the crowd, you know, see people's reaction. Even with the transition because of COVID, where there's live production kind of took a huge plummet. We've kind of all evolved and have made like a big movement towards like Twitch, streaming platforms, and just doing different things different ways. And even then, it's still the same kind of excitement and passion where, yeah, I don't get to see the crowd screaming in front of me enjoying it, but I get to see, you know, like a chat where I get to feel that feeling where it's live and I suck into the feeling of it. So
see, that's one avenue that I haven't explored yet as a creative, and I really should look into it more. But streaming in particular is something that I'm not familiar with. Is there any tips you can give like a newbie like myself about streaming that you learned?
So I was actually I was listening to like a video, like a vlog almost, where it was more of a podcast, but it was just a video, like camera on, with Markiplier the other night, as me and my girlfriend was kind of driving back to my place. We were talking about, and in the podcast, he talks about something that, I'll put it like this is all relevant. So him and a couple of people were talking about the difference of YouTube versus Twitch, streaming versus like recording videos, like as a video content creator. It's like anyone that knows Markiplier knows that he's a content creator for YouTube, and he is talking to some difference between the two. I suggest kind of trying the two different ones, where one is you record your footage, and then like for example you speaking different shots, you edit it together, and then you upload it. Or if you're doing it live, when you're recording it, you have more control. You can definitely go back, edit out like different chops, things like that. When you're live, you don't really have as much control, but you have a chat room where you could bounce off people. You could, you know, you feel a little bit more relaxed. There's two things I always recommend. One, background music. If you're gonna do live, have some little small background music that you could adjust the volume of. Whenever you're speaking. Just that way it's filling in a little bit of the dead air moments. Mm-hmm. And not to mention, it's always one of those things where you gotta figure out what you want to stream. So like, for example, when I stream videos of me creating stuff, and I use that as a way to also invite people that have been wondering, okay, how do you do this? How do you do this in this 3D program? How do you do this in the Unreal Engine? And I'll do kind of a like workcast of me working on a scene and then explaining how I'm going through it and responding to questions as, you know, I'm in the scene, which is great because then I get to work on stuff, I get to stream, and at the same time get to answer my friends' questions. But I know when I first started doing the opposite, where I was recording through Twitch, through YouTube, and then uploading it, I'd have a lot of moments where I was just like worried that I had, do you know what dead air is, by the way?
Yeah, it's like where you're just sitting there just basically humming to yourself, and you're like...
Exactly.
And people are just like, hey, put out some content, and you're just like, I'm trying.
Yeah, so my biggest thing with dead air is, in those moments, just... I guess what I'm trying to get at is, my answer is just kind of experiment, you know? Try out different things, understand that no one starts off with the best podcast, or no one starts off with their best streams. The first thing I always recommend is, one, figure out what you want to stream. I do, like I said, work throughs where I'm working on something and I'm talking about it. Or, like, I know some people do streaming for gaming. I know some people will do, like, I believe you're a photographer, right?
I'm a videographer.
You're a videographer?
Yeah.
So I need to see people do, like, they'll have a camera hooked up with, like, a live feed, and then they're just explaining, you know, hey, this is what we're doing today, guys, things like that. I know a lot of videographers that do that more as the YouTube recorded videos, you know? Yeah. And the biggest thing is, I recommend whatever you're thinking about making, watch other people make it, watch a lot of the videos of other people doing the same thing, and then pick up on the things you like, pick up on the things you don't like, and kind of adapt and build from that, you know?
But you were talking about, like, knowing your audience, knowing your, like, target and everything, but for me, like, the whole... and everything.
I was gonna say, it's less of knowing your audience and everything. It's knowing what you like in when other people do it. Because at the end of the day, like, you can create so much targeted stuff for like your audience, but like, if you don't like it, if you're not having fun, then it's just not worth it, you know? You should always create with like a mindset of, I'm creating this because I want to create this, or I like this because I like it, you know?
Yeah, like, for example, one thing that I don't do at all, but I know a lot of streamers or people that I watch in the past go, let's do some memes, or some kind of jargon slogan, I guess you can say it. And every time as like nearly a 30-year-old, I'm just sitting in my chair just cringing into a corner.
I mean, everything has its moments. Like, I'm in my 30s, and I'll safely say, like, I like memes, but like, there's times of, like you said, there's moments for it. Like, you can't just like start a stream and be like, we're gonna just look at memes and that's it. You can do like, it comes from the kind of concept where it's like, what do I want to make? You know, do I want to make like do I want my streams to be like just memes? Do I want my streams to be informational? You know, like that all comes into the mindset of like, what am I making this for? You know, so
like the main thing that I try to head towards in my content creation is like for this podcast, especially like interviewing and everything. For me personally, I always get best information out of another person and everything, and I always like having the conversation and talking with people, because I just feel like sitting down and having a conversation is the best way I learn personally, and that's mainly what Nerd Talk is all about. Just like I said, two nerds just discussing stuff, and if people get information out of it, all the better in the long run.
yeah, I get that.
So you brought up video games in particular, like being your, like, I guess driving force. Was there any in particular that, like, I want to do that? Like, that was your, like, drive to hit towards? Like, what? Like,
well,
what?
I always liked, some of the big things that, like, really got me was the visual aspects of, like, don't get me wrong, like, a good game isn't just, like, it just needs to look pretty. It's the storytelling of it, you know? It's when I was a kid, like, I played a lot of video games, and I still do. I just played a lot more back then, and I know one of the biggest things was, like, I wanted to get into learning how to create, like, characters and vast world, and tell a story through them. And it's crazy, because now I'm using the Unreal Engine, and I'm not using it for video games, I'm using it for, like, live shows. But it's one of those things where, like, the more I got into graphics, like, I started out learning Photoshop, then learning motion, and learning 3D. I realized I also grew and kind of understood the woes of the gaming industry, and the more I really kind of got into it, the more I realized it was never really about gaming industry to me. It was more, I just wanted to make cool stuff, you know? I just want to make visual stuff that when I see it, like, it's just eye-captivating, that's just fun to make, you know?
Yeah.
And without even actually getting into the games, like the gaming industry, it's kind of been what I've been doing, you know? And I think it's one of the most, like, inspirational, like, quotes I'll remember was, it was an interview on, like, Tech TV. I think it was G4 TV, and they interviewed the guy that was one of the head developers, Halo. This was around the launch of Halo 2, which to this day is one of the greatest games that ever came out. This guy talked about, keep in mind, like I said, I grew up in New York, so this guy talked about, one day he walked out into the middle of Times Square, one of the busiest intersections in the world, and as someone that has been to Times Square, I will vouch on, you know, prior to COVID, it is always busy, it's packed, it's millions of people there. He said that he was able at one point to just stand in one spot and look around and just point and think, this person played my game, this person probably enjoyed this point of it, this person looked like they loved this point, and it was just such a, like, awe-inspiring thing to think about, like, as an artist, the things you create, just that broad reach of it, you know? And it was something that, like, I want to create stuff that when other people see it, it could be people I'll never meet, it could be someone walking by me in the middle of Times Square that it might inspire them.
One thing in particular that, as a movie person, like, the thing that got me into movies was wanting to create that experience, because I know he's gotten a lot of flack here in the last couple of years, but Hayao Miyazaki was, like, my big inspiration, and people...
Oh, totally sick. Like, still to this day, one of the greatest, like, creators in the anime, and not just the anime, in just any type of motion world, you know?
And as a kid, the first movie I watched of his is my favorite movie. Is still was Spirited Away, and I watched it when I was, I think, 13. But as soon as I got done watching that for a 3-hour block on Toonami, I was like, I want to do that. And my dad's like, oh, make cartoons, and I guess. But I've learned more recently that I don't have the patience for animation. But I do have like that creative drive to make something and still want to go out there and create. Like, that's always been my thing. And I brought up went for the video game angle because one video game series that's also a cartoon that I really like was Pokemon, and that bridge necessarily from animation to video games and whatever else Pokemon wants to do, because Pokemon's $1 million franchise that has its hand in everything now.
Literally one of the biggest, like, if not the biggest animated franchise in the world. Pokemon as a whole beats Disney, which is insane.
And now Disney owns Pokemon, which is even more insane.
No, wait, Disney doesn't own Pokemon. They offered to buy it, and Pokemon was like, yeah, no, we made way too much money for that.
What the license for the dub, because they do show it on. They did show Sun and Moon on the Disney Channel.
I didn't know that. I know it's still on Netflix. A couple other shows too, channels as well.
Now that I don't know if that's still owned by Disney, that particular series, but I do know that when Sun and Moon came over here to the States, that was broadcasted on Disney. So Disney did have some of it for a little while.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I guess you can say they do own a smidgen of it, but not the whole pie.
Right.
That whole creative aspect, because for me, graphic design, I understand it to the barest extent, because whenever I hear talk about graphic design, I always feel like it's the stuff I see as a video person, like the first image I see, that's the graphic design. But people tell me, no, I'm wrong, that you're totally off on left field, so you can tell me, am I wrong in my assumptions on that?
Well, I mean, graphic design, like, describing something as just, graphic design is kind of a broad spectrum. Like, it's not just, like, one thing. It's also, I don't know, graphic design, yes, it is the visual aspect of, what you see. And you get this as a videographer, because that's, like, for example, describing video versus audio, describing sound play into, like, elements of motion, where you add in certain B-roll, there's a lot more that goes into it. But graphic design to me is in the rawest, it is, what you see, it's what you feel, and it's understanding and creating to solve whatever the purpose of that feeling is. Because art is literally just meant to portray an emotion and invoke emotion. So with graphic design, you're using the scientific and, more studied side of it of not only just art, but also, marketing, of like good storytelling, of good aesthetically pleasing factors to create, like, not just an image, but a story. Because graphic design isn't just a still image, it's so much more that goes into it. Everything from the clothes you wear to, like, the billboards you see, the ads you watch, like, there's so much stuff that goes into it that's kind of a hard thing to just sum up as one element,
Yeah, and I didn't mean to trail on you like that, because, like I said, as a video person, I get that people think, oh, you're the guy who points the camera and does that. I'm like, no, I don't just point the camera. I make sure that you hear what I'm saying, that everything.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And so whenever someone's like, hey, you do this, right? Can you help me with blank? And you're like, that's one aspect of it, but I got 500 more things that I need to know before I can start on a project.
Yeah. Totally. There's so much more that goes into it. It's at that point, it's one of those things where just a lot of people don't really get that,
Yeah, and again, I just wanted to clear the air because, like I said, as a video person, I get when people misunderstand when I say I do video, because they're like, oh, you do blank, and I'm like, that's one aspect, if you want.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're almost there, you kind of got it,
Yeah, you're like I said, you're a smidgen there.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
But, are you freelancing right now, or do you work for, like, a couple of companies in particular, or can you say?
Technically, I work for a few companies. I'm technically a 3D designer for Smile Direct Club. I do motion graphics, 3D ads. I'm also, like I said, I do stage production and live production for
believe me, I get you. Like right now, like the thing that hit me the most hard with last year in particular was I want to start my own business necessarily and get my video stuff going and everything. And one thing that is, since that happened, I was trying to like get weddings planned, and they're like, okay, we'll do it later in the year. But since that virus kept on going, they're like, hey, we have to cancel on you. I'm like, well, shit. But I understand.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not much you can do in those situations, you know.
And but your field seems to be doing okay, at least in some aspects, which is good. You're not hurting in the long run. You're still hurting necessarily, but you're still doing okay, I guess, right?
Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, I was gonna say I work fine. One of the biggest things, and this is something that I kind of learned pretty early into my career when I first started designing, was kind of I don't want to say jack of all trades because that's a terrible idea, but kind of be flexible in your knowledge, understand, especially with the design. There's a lot more of I want to say, there's a little bit more leeway in this. Understand how to be able to work one program to do multiple things, you know? Like, for example, understand that one program can do 500 different things. It's just figuring out how to get it to do it, you know?
Yeah.
But, yeah, like, I've always been pretty big about, like, just trying new things. And so when COVID really kind of kicked off, I was still able, and all the shows got canceled in person, I was still able to kind of work in the things I was already doing, like as far as design goes, you know?
Yeah. What is one thing that one job, I should say, or a mess of them that you thought was the most challenging? Like, what was the most challenging job for you? If you can say.
I don't know how to answer that, actually. Yeah. No, I'm just trying to figure out how I can answer that. Let's see. I've worked a lot of different jobs. I've worked a lot of different, opportunities. I'm grateful for. I've gotten to work on a lot of different projects. I think one of the biggest ones that was kind of a tackle was like let's see. It's hard to say. I'm not sure, but because a lot of times whenever I learned this pretty like early in my career. This is something that I see a lot of people kind of go through and ask me about. Whenever you get into, this is as someone that's kind of jumped from different types of projects, going from like, one day I may be animating an entire building, the next day I may be building a stage, or the next day I may be learning something. Kind of just jump in and understand that no one's the master at the beginning of it. It takes 10,000 hours to be a master level at anything. So, but that 10,000 hours doesn't start until you take that first minute. So, with that being said, you're going to start off not knowing how to be able to tackle whatever project. Just kind of, just approach it with an open mind, try things out, and it ends up working out after a while. So, I think one of the hardest ones I ever had was definitely one of the first times that I started working in 3D. Well, I started working as a motion designer, because as a motion designer, it took me understanding, and this was something that took me kind of years to get into, was understanding, not only does something have to look good as a still frame, it has to look good in motion. It has to look good and make sense. The motion can't just be like a random, like, oh, this is just going to explode. Okay, but why? There's a lot more that goes into these things that I just didn't understand at first, So now I'm a little bit better about a lot of stuff, but it's definitely one of those things where I think the hardest part has been, in a lot of these different situations that I'm kind of describing, has been just playing around, getting used to stuff, I guess.
Yeah. Like, for me, personally, whenever I reached a challenge within my video, like, let's say somebody asked me to help them with their music video or something, I was trying to look at like the lyrics, look at the lyrics of the song and try to pick out like one thing in particular that I thought could make it interesting if I chose to do something with it and go from there.
Okay, I get that.
Yeah, so it's similar, I guess, into a way what you were saying.
Yeah.
There was one more question I'm gonna ask before we because I feel like it sounds like you're kind of busy and I don't want to take up your time if that's okay. But
No problem, man.
what is one thing that you learned that you can share with everybody that they should know? Like one thing that you want to share?
Dude, because it's fun. Like, regardless of whatever you're doing, you know, like whether you be a motion designer, graphic designer, video editor, stage productionist, streamer, YouTuber, do it because you feel like a satisfied feeling behind it. Don't do it because like, oh, this is the market that they're looking for. Oh, this is the job skill that I'm gonna get into because, you know, this is in demand right now. Because one, the way things work in demand is you'll never, unless you're already ahead of the curve, like you're never gonna play catch up. Because you can learn something in rush it, but like if you're not enjoying it, you're not gonna have a good time learning it. And then for all you know, by the time you finish learning it, it may already be out of date. Do what you want in the creative field. One of the biggest things that we get is we have the ability to do what we want literally just because we love it, because it's cool to us, you know? And with that, just create just because it's fun, you know?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
No problem. Glad to be on.
And if you want to follow him, I'll leave a link to some place where you can find him at and catch up on there.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Alright, bye everyone. Bye.